This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Paul Hansen. Thurley, Ruxton by Philip Verrill Mighels. Chapter 47. A Thoroughbred. Gaylord had rarely in his life felt more assured, more confident, restored, or at his ease. The man was amazingly transformed. There is no such tonic as victory with a dash of self-approval. He had entered on his flight against Faishi with a vigour so reinforced and dominant that the Count could scarcely have recognized the man he had encountered. He had smashed his way to supremacy in the situation with a power that astonished himself. Tonight he was firmly on his feet again, and looked the part. His skin was clear and ruddy, his eyes were steadied and apparently hardened to a new blued steel species of temper. With composure regained and buoyancy reasserted in his step and carriage, he felt himself once more master of his destiny and able to cope with the world. Thurley was honestly glad to behold a change so complete and unexpected. She had once felt untold admiration for the qualities crystallized in Gaylord's composition. A slight reoccurrence of her old-time appreciation of his better self stirred in her being tonight. She knew he had beaten Faishi, and for that she rejoiced as a friend. "You see, I couldn't wait, and my wish to tell it all in person," he explained, holding her hands as she faced him there alone. "I wanted to come and acknowledge frankly that you saved the situation. I wanted to know that you are glad as I see in your eyes you are." "It gratifies me very much," she told him sincerely. "If I helped a little, I rejoice." She withdrew her hands and asked him to find himself a seat. He drew a chair close to hers and leaned familiarly forward, reaching to take her hand again where she leaned on a golden stand. With a motion apparently slow and unintentional, she placed the hand in her lap. "Thoroughly," he said, in the modulated tone she had once responded to with thrills, "you're a noble little girl, the finest little woman I have known in all the world." "Thank you," she answered lightly. "We are both still rather young." He was not to be diverted from his purpose. He seemed almost not to have heard her reply. "You know I told you once upon a time there was no one like you, Thurley. I told you that you were a thoroughbred, remember?" Thurley grew more self-possessed. "I recall Could it have been in connection with anything in particular?" "Oh, come, little girl, you remember," he said. "I'll face it, take my medicine, everything I deserve. I thought at one time I was doomed for the axe, but thank God your spirit's too big for petty revenge. You are a thoroughbred, I knew it all along. But heavens, little captain of the Tigress, what a wonderful relief, what an unthinkable happiness to get back to our good old chumming again, and forget all that's gone between." This time he caught her hand so swiftly and with a grip so sure that she had neither time nor strength to escape. "You're hurting my fingers," she told him, unmoved by his speech. "Please sit back in your chair, Mr. Gaylord." And "Mr. Gaylord!" he echoed abruptly. She smiled and arched her brows. "What else should I say?" "Do you mean to keep this up?" he said. "Come now, Thurley, be yourself. You've punished me enough." "Punished you? For what?" "Do you know what I mean? What does a college graduate know of what he wants or says or does at a time like that? You've punished me thoroughly, and you know it." "Isn't it just the usual college sort of thing?" She forced a smile, which his egotism misinterpreted. "You little rogue," he answered, doing his best to outmatch her mirth and laugh her mood away. "We cared for each other, as you cannot deny, and that sort of caring lasts. If not, then why your friendship now, when you saw me down and out?" "I agree to friendship heartily," she said. "I honestly wish—" "Oh, it's more than that, little girl," he interrupted, leaning closer as before. "Now tell me candidly, like the candid little girl I've always known, why did you fly to my assistance with $30,000? Her face was grave, even pale. She faced him steadily. "In the first place, I very much wished you to beat that man, Count Fieschi." "Yes, I felt that, of course. I understood all that. But the real reason, Thurley, that's the one I'm after." He was sure of the corner to which she was forced, sure she would not evade, sure she would melt, as in the early days, and tell him what he wished to know, if only with her eyes. She did not evade, and her eyes were eloquent of truth. "I have been long anxious to repay you for all the flowers and chocolates, the attentions, kindnesses, and college friendship," she answered in a clear, low voice that surprised herself, so violent was the beating of her heart. "I have wished to even up the favours, and to show you that sort of friendship I learned was all I should ever have expected there at home. I wished to preserve the friendly feeling you have always entertained. I hope I have, and I hope you understand." He could not fail to understand, with a glaring vividness that left him stunned and dazed. He was placed under lifelong obligations, and cast to the outer regions where a formal, half-cold friendship was all he could ever expect. The dominant power, once his and neglected, had melted into air and gone for ever. The sense of it all crept through and over him with the tangible effect of a tide, chilling his being through and through. He was silent for a moment, staring at her fixedly. When he spoke, his voice had changed. "You mean that, Thurley? That's your final word?" She met his gaze unflinchingly. "You asked me to be candid. I have taken you at your word." She marvelled at the ease with which she answered. A reactionary passion rose for a final beating against the barriers within him. The old self, yet to be outgrown, once more took possession of his mood. He rose in his heat. "By heaven," he said, "if I'd known of this, I'd never have taken your help, your money, anything. You haven't the right. You'd better be careful, Thurley, how you play with a man like this. Your position here, this masquerade—" "Don't threaten again to divulge it, please, for your own sake," she interrupted. "It would be so useless after what I have planned for myself. It would rob me so utterly of all I have remaining of the Acton Gaylord I'm sure I used to know." "You've tricked me," he said, less truculently. "You are living a trick. Your head has been turned. You seem to think— Oh, Thurley, I don't mean all this madness. I'm not an absolute cad. But this thing hits me. When I was sure, when I thought you'd forgiven— Forget what I've said. Tell me you didn't mean it. I want to be friends, be all I ever was and more. I want a chance to prove I'm a better friend than you think. I've confessed my blunder made at college. Let's be friends again and begin all over where we were." Thurley, too, had risen. She had never felt more distant from him, more ostracised by all that he said or did, nor yet more sorry or helpless. She looked him a little wistfully, poignantly affected by it all. "I want your friendship, believe me," she said. "I want it very much, and to give you mine, the most that I can offer." Something occurred deep down in his nature to alter his view of himself. His face was twitching with the struggle of his better entity to force itself to the top. "All you can offer," he said, peculiarly, as much to himself as to Thurley, and he nodded his head with a grim, if belated, comprehension of what it implied. "I've made a fool of myself." A ghastly sort of smile played for a moment over his features. "Will you shake hands, Thurley, for goodbye? Will you let me tell you again in a different way? You are a thoroughbred." She gave him her hand, which he gripped as he might have clasped a man's. "You're more than that," he added huskily. "You're a princess, if ever one lived." He sounded the light in her frank brown eyes, finding there nothing but the truth. "Ah, goodbye," he murmured. "God keep you as you are." And Thurley sat down when the door had closed, wondering at it all. She was there when Alice entered, excited by new events. "The Duke has been here for nearly 15 minutes," she said, "and now here's the Baron and Wank." "I know," said the Princess, smiling faintly. "I wrote and asked them to come." "Good Lord," said Alice, "talk about the Sphinx. I just saw number 2 go out, Acton, of course, and looking more as if he'd found himself than I think I somehow expected." "Oh, I'm glad," said Thurley honestly. "That makes me very happy." Alice looked her disconcerted puzzlement. After all her hopes, she was nearly convinced that Gaylord still possessed the girl's real heart, in spite of all that had happened. "The Duke is wearing out his shoes, his pocket, and his intellect," she stated in her customary spirit. "Will you have him in with his tamer, or alone?" Thurley smiled a little wearily. "He probably prefers to come alone, like all the others." "You poor dear child," said Alice, and kissed her in sympathy and love. End of chapter 47.